Hello, and welcome to this quiet space we've created together. A place where there's no need to rush, no need to remember everything, and no pressure to stay awake. You can simply let yourself settle into wherever you are right now, allowing your body to find its most comfortable position, letting your breath slow to its own natural rhythm, and giving yourself permission to drift wherever your mind would like to go. There's nothing you need to do, nothing you need to prove, and nowhere else you need to be. This is simply time that belongs to you, and in this time, we're going to explore something quite beautiful and surprisingly comforting. The gentle, forgiving nature of how we remember and how we forget. Memory is often thought of as something we must hold on to tightly, as though our minds are meant to be perfect archives, preserving every detail of every moment with flawless clarity. But the truth, the scientific truth, is so much softer than that, so much more forgiving. Our brains were never designed to remember everything, and in fact, forgetting is not a failure of your mind. It's one of the most essential, most protective things your brain does for you, quietly, constantly, without you ever having to ask. And tonight, as you rest here, you might find it deeply reassuring to know that your brain is working exactly as it should, filtering the world with a kind of wisdom that helps you move through life without being overwhelmed by every single detail you've ever encountered. Let's begin by thinking about what memory actually is, not as a test or a challenge, but as a gentle process happening in the background of your awareness, like breathing, or like the way your heart beats without your conscious effort. Memory is not a single thing stored in a single place. It's more like a quiet conversation between different parts of your brain, a soft coordination of signals and patterns that emerge when they're needed and fade when they're not. When you remember something, you're not pulling out a photograph from a filing cabinet in your mind. Instead, your brain is recreating an experience, piecing it together from fragments scattered across different regions, weaving together sights, sounds, emotions, and meanings into something that feels whole, even though it's being gently reconstructed in that very moment. Neuroscientists have discovered that memories are stored in networks of neurons, cells in your brain that connect to one another through tiny gaps called synapses, where chemical and electrical signals pass back and forth like whispered messages in a vast, dimly lit library. When you experience something new, certain neurons fire together, forming a pattern, and as the saying goes in neuroscience, neurons that fire together wire together. This means that the connections between them strengthen, creating a pathway that can be traveled again later when you recall that experience. But these pathways are not rigid or permanent. They are soft, flexible, always changing, always being rewritten slightly each time you remember. Your memories are living things, shifting and reshaping themselves with each recollection, which means that remembering is not about retrieving a fixed record, but about reimagining the past in a way that makes sense to you now, in this present moment. And here is where forgetting becomes not a flaw, but a feature. Your brain is constantly deciding what to keep and what to let go, not randomly, but with a kind of quiet intelligence. It prioritizes what seems important, what carries emotional weight, what connects to other things you know, and it allows the rest to fade gently into the background. This process is called synaptic pruning, and it happens throughout your life, but especially during sleep, which is one reason why sleep is so deeply restorative. While you rest, your brain is sorting through the day's experiences, strengthening the connections that matter and allowing the less important ones to dissolve, like footprints on a beach, slowly smoothed away by the tide. This is not loss. This is care. Your brain is taking care of you, making space for what's meaningful and releasing what would only clutter your inner world. There's a particular kind of forgetting that happens almost immediately, and it's one of the kindest things your brain does for you, though you've probably never noticed it. It's called sensory memory, and it lasts for only a fraction of a second. Every moment, your senses are taking in an overwhelming amount of information. The texture of the surface beneath you, the temperature of the air, the subtle sounds in the distance, the play of light and shadow around you. If your brain held on to all of that, you would be paralyzed by the sheer volume of input. But instead, your brain captures it for just a brief instant, just long enough to decide if it's worth attending to, and then it lets it go, gently, automatically. You don't have to remember the exact pattern of the ceiling you glanced at 3 minutes ago, or the precise tone of a car passing outside, because your brain has already decided, on your behalf, that these details don't need to be carried forward. And so they slip away quietly, leaving you free to focus on what truly matters, or to focus on nothing at all, which is sometimes the most restful state of all. After sensory memory comes something called short-term memory, or working memory, which is like a small, softly lit room in your mind where you can hold a few pieces of information at once, turning them over, thinking about them, using them for whatever task is at hand. This kind of memory is temporary by design. It's not meant to last. It's meant to serve you in the moment and then dissolve, making space for the next moment and the next. Research suggests that most people can hold about 7 pieces of information in their working memory at any given time, though this number varies, and it's influenced by things like how tired you are, how calm you feel, and how much your attention is divided. But even at its best, working memory is fleeting. It's like writing a note in sand near the water's edge. It's there for as long as you need it, and then the waves come and smooth it away. And that's exactly as it should be. Some of the information in your working memory, if it's repeated, if it's meaningful, if it's connected to something you already know, will begin the process of consolidation, the process of becoming a long-term memory. But even then, even as it moves into deeper storage, it remains flexible, open to change. Long-term memories are not locked away in vaults. They are stored in distributed networks across your brain, and each time you recall them, you are actually altering them slightly, updating them with new information, new context, new feelings. This is why 2 people can witness the same event and remember it differently, not because one of them is wrong, but because memory is inherently subjective, shaped by perspective, by emotion, by the stories we tell ourselves about what happened and why it mattered. There's a famous study that illustrates this beautifully, conducted by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, who showed people footage of a car accident and then asked them questions about what they had seen. When she asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? People estimated higher speeds than when she asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? The single word, smashed versus hit, influenced not just their answers, but their actual memories of the event. A week later, those who had been asked about the cars smashing were more likely to falsely remember seeing broken glass in the footage, even though there was no broken glass. Their memories had been gently, imperceptibly reshaped by the language used in the question. This tells us something profound and surprisingly comforting. Our memories are not rigid recordings of the past. They are stories we tell ourselves, stories that can be influenced, updated, softened, or revised. And if our painful memories can be softened over time, if the sharp edges can be gradually smoothed away, that is not a weakness of memory. That is a kindness. As we continue to explore the gentle architecture of memory, it's worth spending some time with the different types of memory that exist within you, working quietly in the background, often without your awareness. These categories are not walls or separate compartments. They overlap and interact, flowing into one another like water finding its level, but understanding them can help you appreciate just how beautifully complex and forgiving your mind truly is. There's explicit memory, also called declarative memory, which includes the things you can consciously recall and describe, like facts, events, and experiences. And then there's implicit memory, also called non-declarative memory, which includes skills, habits, and conditioned responses. Things you know without knowing that you know them. Things that live in your body as much as in your mind. Explicit memory itself divides into 2 main types. There's episodic memory, which holds your personal experiences, the specific events of your life, the time you walked through a park on a spring morning, the conversation you had last week with a friend, the way the light looked coming through a window on a quiet afternoon. These memories are often rich with sensory detail and emotion. and they give you a sense of continuity, a feeling of being the same person moving through time. And then there's semantic memory, which holds general knowledge, facts about the world that are not tied to a specific moment or experience. You know that Paris is the capital of France, that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, that the Earth orbits the Sun, but you probably don't remember the exact moment you learned these things. They exist as free-floating knowledge, useful and accessible, but without the personal context of episodic memory. What's fascinating, and what might feel quite relaxing to consider, is that these two types of memory can function independently. You can lose your episodic memories, your personal history, and still retain your semantic knowledge, your understanding of language, facts, and concepts. This happens in certain types of amnesia, where someone might forget the events of their own life but still remember how to speak, how to read, how to navigate the world with general knowledge intact. And conversely, you can lose semantic knowledge while retaining episodic memory, though this is less common. The point is that your memory is not a single fragile thread that can snap and leave you with nothing. It's a tapestry woven from many different threads, and even if some of them fray or fade, others remain, holding the pattern together, allowing you to continue to adapt, to find new ways of being in the world. Implicit memory, on the other hand, is even more quietly resilient. This is the memory that lives in your muscles, in your reflexes, in the automatic patterns of behavior you've developed over time. When you ride a bicycle, you're not consciously remembering how to balance, how to pedal, how to steer. You're drawing on implicit memory, procedural memory, a kind of knowing that bypasses conscious thought entirely. This type of memory is remarkably durable. Even if you haven't ridden a bicycle in years, your body remembers. Even if you've forgotten the name of your childhood street, your hands still remember how to tie your shoes, how to type on a keyboard, how to reach for a cup without looking. These memories are stored in different parts of the brain than explicit memories, often in areas like the basal ganglia and the cerebellum, regions that coordinate movement and habit. And they tend to persist even when other types of memory begin to fade. There's a tenderness in this, a kind of loyalty in the way your body holds onto what it has learned, even when your conscious mind lets go. It means that even in the face of forgetting, even if names and dates and events begin to blur, you are not erased. You are still here, still capable, still carrying within you a lifetime of learning that doesn't depend on conscious recall. And this is one of the most comforting truths about memory. It is distributed, redundant, adaptive. It does not rest on a single point of failure. It is woven throughout your entire being, in your brain, in your body, in the patterns of your behavior, and it continues to serve you even when you are not aware of it. Now, let's turn our attention to the process of forgetting itself, not as a problem to be solved, but as a phenomenon to be appreciated. Forgetting begins almost immediately after learning. The first person to study this systematically was a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus, who, in the late 1800s, conducted experiments on his own memory, testing his ability to recall lists of nonsense syllables over time. What he discovered is now known as the forgetting curve, a graph that shows how information is lost over time when there is no attempt to retain it. Ebbinghaus found that forgetting happens rapidly at first. Within the first hour, you might forget a significant portion of what you've just learned. But then the rate of forgetting slows, leveling off into a gradual decline. This curve is not a sign of a broken system, it's a sign of efficiency. Your brain is quickly filtering out what doesn't seem important, what isn't reinforced, what doesn't connect to anything else, and it does this so that you're not burdened with an endless accumulation of trivial details. But here's what's beautiful about the forgetting curve. It can be bent. When you revisit information, when you practice, when you think about something again, the forgetting curve becomes shallower. Each time you retrieve a memory, you strengthen it, making it more resistant to forgetting. This is called the spacing effect, and it's the reason why distributed practice, reviewing information over time, is so much more effective than cramming everything at once. But even this is not about perfection. Even with practice, you will still forget. The curve will still decline, just more slowly. And that's okay. That's more than okay. It means your brain is still doing its job, still making decisions about what to keep and what to release, still taking care of you in ways you might not consciously recognize. There are different theories about why we forget, and each of them offers a different perspective on this gentle, necessary process. One theory is decay, the idea that memories simply fade over time if they're not used, like a path through a forest that becomes overgrown when no one walks it anymore. The neural connections weaken, the synapses lose their strength, and the memory becomes harder and harder to access until eventually it's gone. This is a passive process, a natural erosion, and there's something almost poetic about it, the idea that memories that no longer serve you are allowed to quietly dissolve back into the background, making space for new growth, new experiences, new connections. Another theory is interference, the idea that new information can disrupt old memories, or that old memories can make it harder to learn new things. There's proactive interference, where old memories interfere with new learning, like when you've learned one language and then struggle to learn a second because the first keeps intruding. And there's retroactive interference, where new memories interfere with old ones, like when you move to a new address and suddenly find it harder to remember your old one because the new information is overwriting the old. But even interference is not a flaw. It's a consequence of a system that is constantly updating, constantly integrating new information with what's already there, constantly prioritizing the present over the past. Your brain is not a museum, preserving the past in static displays. It's a living, changing entity, focused on helping you navigate the world as it is now, not as it was. And then there's motivated forgetting, the idea that sometimes we forget because, on some level, we want to. This can happen unconsciously through a process called repression, where painful or traumatic memories are pushed out of conscious awareness as a form of self-protection. Or it can happen more deliberately through suppression, where you consciously choose not to think about something, to set it aside, to let it fade. There's ongoing debate in psychology about how effective and how healthy these processes are, but what's clear is that your mind has mechanisms for protecting you from overwhelm, for shielding you from experiences that are too difficult to bear. And while this can sometimes create complications, it also speaks to the deep compassion built into your own nervous system, the way it tries, in its own way, to keep you safe. One of the most reassuring discoveries in the science of memory is that forgetting is not always permanent. Just because you can't recall something right now doesn't mean it's gone forever. Memories exist on a spectrum of accessibility, and often what feels like forgetting is really just a temporary inability to retrieve what's still there, stored somewhere in the vast network of your brain, waiting for the right cue, the right context, the right moment to resurface. This is the difference between availability and accessibility. A memory might be available, meaning it still exists in your brain, but not accessible, meaning you can't quite reach it right now. And this distinction is important because it means that much of what you think you've forgotten is simply resting quietly out of reach, and it might return to you when you least expect it. You've probably experienced this yourself. The frustration of trying to remember a name or a word, feeling it right on the tip of your tongue, knowing that you know it but being unable to grasp it. And then, hours later, when you've stopped trying, when you're thinking about something else entirely, the word simply appears in your mind effortlessly, as though it had been waiting for you to relax before it could come forward. This is called the tip of the tongue phenomenon, and it's a perfect example of how retrieval works. The memory is there, but the pathways to access it are temporarily blocked, perhaps by stress, by distraction, by interference from other thoughts. And when you stop straining, when you let go of the effort, the block dissolves and the memory flows back into awareness, gentle and unhurried. There's a concept in memory research called encoding specificity, which suggests that the ease with which you can retrieve a memory depends on how closely your current state matches the state you were in when the memory was formed. This includes your physical environment, your emotional state, even subtle things like sounds and smells. If you learn something while you're in a particular room, you're more likely to remember it when you're back in that room. If you're happy when you form a memory, you're more likely to recall it when you're happy again. This is why returning to a place you haven't been in years can suddenly flood you with memories you thought you'd forgotten. The context acts as a key, unlocking doors you didn't even know were closed, and the memories come rushing back, vivid and surprising, as though they'd been waiting there all along. There's also state-dependent memory, which is similar but focuses on your internal state rather than your external environment. If you learn something while you're calm, you'll remember it better when you're calm again. If you learn something while you're anxious, you might recall it more easily when you're anxious, though this is not always helpful. But the principle remains: your memories are woven into the fabric of your experiences, and they're most accessible when the fabric looks and feels the way it did when the memory was made. This is why certain songs can transport you instantly to a specific moment in your past, why certain scents can evoke memories you haven't thought about in decades. Your brain is making connections constantly, linking what you're experiencing now with what you've experienced before. And these connections serve as pathways back to memories that might otherwise remain out of reach. Sleep plays an extraordinary role in all of this, in the formation of memories, in their consolidation, in the process of forgetting what doesn't need to be kept. When you sleep, especially during the deeper stages of sleep and during REM sleep, your brain is extraordinarily active, replaying the events of the day, strengthening the neural connections that represent important memories, and weakening the connections that represent less important information. This process is called memory consolidation, and it's one of the primary reasons why sleep is so essential for learning. If you study something and then sleep, you'll remember it better than if you study and then stay awake. Your brain uses the quiet time of sleep to sort through everything you've encountered, deciding what to keep, what to integrate, and what to let go, all without any conscious effort on your part. There's a particularly beautiful process that happens during sleep called synaptic homeostasis, which is the brain's way of resetting itself, preventing your neural networks from becoming overloaded. Throughout the day, as you learn and experience new things, your synapses, the connections between neurons, grow stronger and more numerous. If this continued unchecked, your brain would eventually become saturated, unable to form new connections, unable to learn anything new. But during sleep, especially during deep sleep, your brain scales back these connections, pruning away the weaker ones, making space for new learning, new experiences, new growth. This is not forgetting in the sense of loss. This is forgetting in the sense of curation, of making sure that what remains is what truly matters, what truly serves you, what truly contributes to your ability to navigate the world with clarity and ease. And there's something deeply comforting in knowing that while you sleep, while you rest, while you let go of the day, your brain is working quietly to take care of you, to organize your experiences, to strengthen what's important and release what's not. You don't have to do anything, you don't have to try. You simply have to allow yourself to rest, to trust that your mind knows what it's doing, that it has been doing this for as long as humans have existed, long before anyone understood the mechanisms behind it. Sleep is not a passive state. It's an active process of healing, of integration, of gentle forgetting, and every night that you sleep, you are giving your brain the gift of time and space to do what it does best. There are different stages of sleep, and each of them contributes to memory in different ways. During non-REM sleep, especially the deeper stages known as slow-wave sleep, your brain is focused on consolidating declarative memories, the facts and events you've learned during the day. The hippocampus, a small seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain that's essential for forming new memories, replays these experiences, sending them out to the cortex, the outer layer of the brain, where they can be stored more permanently. This replay happens in rapid bursts of neural activity called sleep spindles and sharp wave ripples, and it's during these moments that your memories are being transferred from temporary storage to something more lasting, more integrated with everything else you know. During REM sleep, the stage of sleep where most dreaming occurs, your brain is working on a different kind of memory consolidation, focusing more on emotional memories and procedural memories, the skills and habits you've been practicing. REM sleep is when your brain makes creative connections, linking disparate pieces of information in novel ways, which is why sleep can sometimes lead to insights and solutions that eluded you while you were awake. You might go to bed with a problem unsolved and wake up with the answer, not because you were consciously thinking about it, but because your brain, in its dreaming state, was exploring possibilities, making associations, finding patterns that your waking mind had overlooked. And in all of this, in all the stages of sleep, in all the processes of consolidation and pruning, there is forgetting. But it's forgetting in service of something larger, something kinder. It's forgetting as a form of care, as a way of making sure that you're not carrying more than you need to carry, that you're not burdened with every trivial detail, every passing thought, every momentary distraction. Your brain is constantly asking, on your behalf, what do you need to remember? And what can you afford to let go? And most of the time, it gets the answer right. Most of the time, what you forget is exactly what you didn't need to keep. As we move deeper into this exploration, it's worth considering the role of emotion in memory, the way feelings shape what we remember and what we forget, often in ways that are surprising and deeply humane. Emotion is not separate from memory, it's woven into it, inseparable, a fundamental part of how your brain decides what's important enough to keep. Events that carry strong emotions, whether joyful or painful, are more likely to be remembered than neutral events, and this makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Your ancestors needed to remember what was dangerous, what brought pleasure, what led to survival or harm. And so your brain is wired to pay special attention to experiences that provoke strong feelings, encoding them more deeply, making them more vivid, more accessible, more resistant to forgetting. There's a structure in your brain called the amygdala, a small almond-shaped cluster of neurons that plays a central role in processing emotions, especially fear and pleasure. When you experience something emotionally significant, the amygdala becomes active, and it sends signals to the hippocampus telling it, essentially, this is important, remember this. The result is that emotional memories are often more detailed, more vivid, and more enduring than neutral memories. You might forget what you had for lunch 3 days ago, but you'll likely remember the moment you heard surprising news, the feeling of a meaningful conversation, the rush of joy or sorrow that accompanied a significant event. Your brain is prioritizing what matters, and it uses emotion as the guide. But here's where it becomes even more interesting and more forgiving. While emotional memories are often stronger, they are not necessarily more accurate. In fact, research has shown that highly emotional events can sometimes be remembered with great confidence but significant distortion. There's a phenomenon called flashbulb memories, where people recall extremely vivid details of where they were and what they were doing when they learned of a major event, like a national tragedy or a personal crisis. These memories feel so clear, so precise, that people are often certain of their accuracy. But when researchers have tested these memories over time, comparing what people reported immediately after the event to what they reported months or years later, they found that the details often change, sometimes dramatically, even though the confidence remains high. This tells us something important. The vividness of a memory does not guarantee its accuracy. Your brain is not a video camera recording objective truth. It's a storyteller, constructing narratives that make sense to you, that fit with your understanding of yourself and the world, and sometimes those narratives shift over time, shaped by new experiences, new perspectives, new emotions. And there's a gentleness in this if you think about it. It means that even your most painful memories, the ones that feel so sharp and so real, are not fixed. They can change. They can soften. The way you remember something today is not the way you will remember it in 5 years or 10 or 20. time, and new experiences, and the natural process of reconsolidation, the process by which memories are updated each time they're recalled, all of these things work together to gradually reshape what you carry with you. Traumatic memories can lose some of their intensity, regrets can be reframed, embarrassments can fade into insignificance. Your brain is not interested in torturing you with perfect recall of every difficult moment. It's interested in helping you survive, in helping you adapt, in helping you find meaning and move forward. And sometimes that means allowing the past to become a little bit blurry, a little bit softer, a little bit easier to live with. There's a therapeutic approach called reconsolidation therapy that takes advantage of this malleability. The idea is that when you recall a traumatic memory, it becomes temporarily unstable, open to change, and if you recall it in a safe, supportive environment, you can actually update it, integrate new information, reduce its emotional intensity. This doesn't mean erasing the memory or pretending it didn't happen. It means changing your relationship to it, allowing it to exist in your past without dominating your present. And this is possible because memories are not static. They are dynamic, living things, and each time you remember, you have an opportunity, however small, to remember differently, to remember with more compassion, more context, more peace. Forgetting painful memories is one of the kindest things your brain can do for you, and it happens more often than you might think. There's a phenomenon called fading effect bias, which refers to the tendency for the emotions associated with negative memories to fade faster than the emotions associated with positive memories. Over time, the sting of embarrassment dulls, the sharp edges of grief become softer, the intensity of anger diminishes. The events themselves may still be remembered, but the feelings attached to them become less vivid, less consuming. Meanwhile, positive memories tend to retain their emotional warmth, their glow, their ability to bring a smile or a sense of comfort. This is not wishful thinking. This is a measurable pattern in how human memory works, and it suggests that your brain has a bias, a gentle, protective bias, toward helping you feel better over time, toward allowing joy to linger and pain to recede. Of course, this doesn't happen uniformly or perfectly. Some painful memories persist with full intensity, especially if they're revisited frequently, if they're tied to ongoing circumstances, if they're not given the space and support they need to heal. But the general pattern holds, and it's a pattern that leans toward kindness, toward resilience, toward the possibility of feeling lighter as time goes on. And knowing this, you might find it a little easier to trust that whatever you're carrying right now, whatever weight feels heavy in your memory, it will not always feel this heavy. Time and the natural processes of your brain are on your side, working quietly, patiently, to help you find a way forward. There's also something called retrieval-induced forgetting, which is the curious phenomenon where remembering some things makes you more likely to forget related things. When you actively recall a particular memory, you strengthen that memory, but you also make it harder to access other memories that are similar or related. It's as though your brain is saying, this is the version that matters, this is what you need to remember, and the other possibilities fade into the background. This can be frustrating if you're trying to remember every detail, but it can also be helpful. It means your brain is streamlining your mental landscape, reducing clutter, helping you focus on what's most relevant, most meaningful, most useful. And if you forget certain details in the process, that's not a failure. That's your brain doing exactly what it's designed to do, prioritizing signal over noise, clarity over confusion. Let's turn now to the relationship between attention and memory, because understanding this connection can help you see forgetting not as a personal shortcoming, but as a natural consequence of how your mind allocates its limited resources. You cannot remember what you never fully attended to in the first place. Memory begins with encoding, the process of taking in information and creating a representation of it in your brain, and encoding requires attention. If your mind is elsewhere, if you're distracted, if you're thinking about multiple things at once, the encoding will be shallow, incomplete, and the resulting memory, if it forms at all, will be weak, fragile, easily forgotten. This is why you might walk into a room and immediately forget why you're there, or why you might meet someone and forget their name moments later. It's not that your memory is broken, it's that you were never fully present in the moment to begin with, and your brain reasonably did not prioritize information you weren't paying attention to. This is actually quite forgiving when you think about it. It means that forgetting is often not about losing something you once had, but about never fully acquiring it in the first place. And if you never fully acquired it, then there's no failure in its absence. You were simply doing what human beings do, moving through the world with a limited capacity for attention, focusing on some things and not others, allowing your mind to wander, to rest, to conserve energy. Your brain cannot process everything. It would be overwhelming, paralyzing if it tried, and so it selects constantly, automatically, what to attend to and what to let pass by, and in doing so, it protects you from the impossible burden of remembering everything. Attention itself is a limited resource, often compared to a spotlight that can only illuminate a small area at a time. When you focus on something, you're shining that spotlight on it, and everything outside the beam fades into relative darkness. This is called selective attention, and it's essential for functioning in a complex world. But it also means that much of what happens around you, much of what you encounter, is never fully encoded into memory because it was never fully attended to. And that's okay. That's more than okay. It's adaptive. It's necessary. It's your brain being efficient, being selective, being wise about where to invest its energy. There's a famous experiment that illustrates this beautifully, called the invisible gorilla experiment. Participants were asked to watch a video of people passing a basketball and count the number of passes. While they were focused on counting, a person in a gorilla suit walked through the scene, stopped in the middle, thumped their chest and walked off. When asked afterward if they noticed anything unusual, about half of the participants said no. They were so focused on counting the passes that they didn't see the gorilla, even though it was right there in plain sight. This isn't a failure of vision or memory. This is a demonstration of how attention works. When your spotlight is focused on one thing, other things, even obvious, unexpected things, can pass by unnoticed. And if you don't notice something, you can't remember it. It was never encoded in the first place. This has implications for everyday forgetting. When you forget where you put your keys, it's often because you weren't paying attention when you set them down. Your mind was elsewhere, thinking about what you needed to do next, replaying a conversation, planning dinner, and the act of placing the keys on the counter was performed automatically, without conscious attention. And so there's no clear memory of it, and when you try to recall later, there's nothing to retrieve. The memory was never formed. This is not a sign of a failing mind. It's a sign of a mind that's doing many things at once, managing complex tasks, navigating a world full of demands and distractions, and sometimes, inevitably, letting minor details slip through the cracks. Mindfulness, the practice of bringing your full attention to the present moment, can help with this, though not in a way that requires effort or discipline. It's more about gently noticing where your attention is, and when it wanders, gently bringing it back, without judgment, without frustration. When you're more present, when you're more aware of what you're doing as you're doing it, encoding improves and memories are more likely to form. But even mindfulness is not about perfection. It's about kindness, about meeting yourself where you are, about recognizing that attention is a limited resource, and that it's okay if you can't be fully present all the time. No one can. No one ever has been. And your brain is designed to work with that limitation, to work around it, to make the best of it, filtering the world so that you're not overwhelmed by information you don't need. There's also the phenomenon of divided attention, which occurs when you try to focus on multiple things at once. Multitasking, as it's often called, is largely a myth, at least in the sense of doing two cognitively demanding tasks simultaneously with equal effectiveness. What you're actually doing is switching your attention rapidly back and forth between tasks, and each switch comes with a cost. Information is lost, encoding is disrupted, and mistakes are more likely. When you try to have a conversation while scrolling through your phone, or listen to a lecture while thinking about your to-do list, neither task gets your full attention, and neither is encoded as well as it could be. The result is that you might forget parts of the conversation, miss key points in the lecture, or have only a vague, fragmented memory of either. But again, this is not a flaw. This is your brain being honest about its limitations, showing you, gently, that it works best when it's allowed to focus on one thing at a time, without the pressure to do everything at once. The modern world, with its constant connectivity, its notifications, its endless stream of information, is not designed to support the kind of sustained, focused attention that leads to deep encoding and strong memories. And so it's no wonder that people often feel like they're forgetting more, like their memory isn't what it used to be. It's not that their brains are failing, it's that the environment has changed, the demands have multiplied, and attention, that precious, limited resource, is being pulled in more directions than ever before. Understanding this can be a relief. It means that if you're forgetting things, if you're feeling scattered, if you can't quite remember what you did yesterday or what someone told you this morning, it's not a personal failure. It's a completely understandable response to a world that's asking more of your attention than it can sustainably give. And there's another layer to this, another way in which forgetting is tied to attention, and it has to do with the passage of time and the natural rhythm of life. Your brain is constantly moving forward, processing new information, encoding new experiences, and in doing so, it naturally lets go of the old. This is not because the old doesn't matter, but because there's only so much space, so much energy, so much attention available. Older memories, especially those that haven't been retrieved or thought about in a long time, fade not because they're actively being erased, but because they're simply not being maintained. They're like a garden that's no longer tended, gradually being reclaimed by the natural processes of growth and decay. And in that reclamation, there's a kind of peace, a recognition that not everything needs to be kept, that some things are meant to be remembered only for a season and then released, making space for what comes next. One of the most profound aspects of memory and forgetting is the way they shape your sense of self, your identity, the story you tell about who you are and where you've been. You are not a collection of isolated moments. You are a narrative woven from memories, some vivid and some faint, some accurate and some reconstructed, some conscious and some beyond your awareness. And this narrative is always being revised, always being updated as new experiences are added and old ones fade or change. Your sense of continuity, the feeling that you are the same person you were yesterday, last year, a decade ago, rests on memory. And yet, paradoxically, the person you are today is not quite the same as the person you were before, because your memories themselves have changed, have been reshaped by time and perspective and the accumulation of new experiences. This is both unsettling and deeply freeing. It means that you are not trapped by your past. The memories that define you are not fixed. They are fluid, open to reinterpretation, open to being seen in a new light, open to being integrated into a larger, more compassionate understanding of your journey. The mistakes you've made, the regrets you carry, the moments you wish you could change, all of these exist in memory, but memory is not a courtroom where you are perpetually on trial. It's a story you're telling yourself, and stories can be told in many ways. You can choose to remember with kindness, with context, with an understanding that you were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. And as you practice this kind of remembering, the memories themselves begin to shift, losing some of their sting, gaining a sense of perspective, becoming part of a larger picture that includes growth, learning, and the possibility of change. There's a concept in psychology called autobiographical memory, which refers to the memories that make up your life story, the events and experiences that you consider significant in shaping who you are. These memories are not randomly selected, they're chosen, consciously or unconsciously, because they fit into the narrative you're constructing about yourself. You remember things that make sense of your current identity, that explain how you became who you are, that support the beliefs you hold about yourself and the world. And you forget, or at least downplay, things that don't fit, that contradict the story, that would complicate the narrative. This is not dishonesty, this is the natural process of meaning-making, of creating coherence out of the vast, chaotic flow of lived experience. And because this process is ongoing, your life story is always being rewritten, subtly, incrementally, as you gain new experiences and new perspectives. The person you are at 30 might tell a very different story about their childhood than the person you are at 50%, not because the facts have changed, but because the meaning has changed, the interpretation has changed, the sense of what was important has shifted. And in this constant revision there is forgetting. Events that once seemed central fade into the background. Details that once felt significant are lost. Entire periods of your life might become hazy, compressed into a few representative memories, or even forgotten almost entirely. And this is not loss. This is the natural sculpting of a life, the way your mind shapes your history into something coherent, something manageable, something that allows you to move forward without being overwhelmed by the totality of everything that has ever happened to you. There's a phenomenon called childhood amnesia, which refers to the fact that most people have very few memories from before the age of 3 or 4, and only fragmentary memories from the years that follow. This is not because nothing important happened during those years. It's because the brain structures necessary for forming and retrieving autobiographical memories, particularly the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, are still developing during early childhood. The memories may form in some sense, but they're not encoded in a way that can be easily retrieved later, and they tend to fade quickly. As an adult, you might have a few scattered images from your early years, often prompted by photographs or stories told by family members, but much of that time is simply gone, inaccessible, and that's completely normal. It's part of how human memory works. And there's something almost restful in that, in knowing that there's an entire chapter of your life that you don't have to carry in conscious memory, that exists more as a feeling, a foundation, than as a collection of specific events. Even memories from later in life are not evenly distributed. There's a phenomenon called the reminiscence bump, which refers to the tendency for older adults to have a disproportionate number of memories from their adolescence and early adulthood, roughly between the ages of 10 and 30. This is thought to happen because those years are often filled with novel experiences, with firsts, with significant life transitions, and novelty enhances encoding. First love, first job, first time living independently. These are the kinds of experiences that stand out, that get rehearsed, that become part of the core narrative of who you are. Meanwhile, the middle years, where life might settle into more routine patterns, are often less well remembered, not because they were less meaningful, but because they were less novel, less distinctive, easier for the brain to compress into general knowledge rather than specific episodic memories. And here again, forgetting is serving you. If you remembered every single day with equal clarity, you would be lost in a sea of detail, unable to extract patterns, unable to learn from experience, unable to form a coherent sense of who you are and what your life has been about. Forgetting allows you to see the shape of your life, the arc, the themes, the moments that truly mattered. It's like looking at a painting from a distance. Up close, you might see every brushstroke, every tiny detail, but from a distance you see the image, the composition, the meaning. Forgetting gives you that distance, that perspective, and in doing so, it helps you understand your life not as a chaotic jumble of moments, but as a story, imperfect and incomplete, but yours. There's also a social dimension to memory and forgetting, a way in which the things you remember and the things you forget are shaped by the people around you, by the stories that get told and retold in your family, your community, your culture. Shared memories, collective memories, are often stronger and more enduring than individual memories because they're reinforced through conversation, through storytelling, through ritual. When you talk about the past with others, you're not just recalling, you're reconstructing, often aligning your memory with theirs. filling in gaps, correcting details, creating a shared narrative that belongs to the group as much as to any individual. And in this process, some memories are strengthened, repeated, kept alive, while others, the ones that don't get talked about, the ones that don't fit the shared narrative, quietly fade away, forgotten not because they weren't real, but because they weren't part of the collective story. This can be both comforting and complex. It means you're not alone in your remembering. You're part of a web of shared history, and that web can support you, can help you hold on to what might otherwise be lost. But it also means that your memory is influenced, sometimes subtly, sometimes profoundly, by the memories and the forgetting of others. And if there are parts of your experience that don't align with the collective narrative, those parts might be harder to hold on to, might feel uncertain, might even be doubted or dismissed. This is not about truth or falsehood. It's about the social nature of memory, the way remembering is always, to some extent, a collaborative act shaped by the people you're with and the stories you tell together. There's a particular kind of forgetting that happens not because memories fade over time, but because the context in which they were formed has changed so dramatically that they no longer make sense, no longer fit, no longer have a place in your current understanding of the world. This is sometimes called disuse. The idea that memories that are no longer relevant, no longer useful, are gradually lost because they're not being retrieved, not being maintained, not being integrated into your ongoing life. And there's a kind of wisdom in this, a recognition that your brain is not a hoarder, clinging to every scrap of information regardless of its value. It's a curator, constantly evaluating what serves you and what doesn't, what helps you navigate your current reality and what is simply taking up space. Think about the things you learned in school, the formulas, the dates, the vocabulary from a language you studied years ago. Unless you've used them regularly, unless they've remained relevant to your life, many of these details have probably faded, become hazy, or disappeared entirely. And this is not a failure of education or a failure of your memory. It's your brain making a practical decision. If you don't need to know the exact date of a historical event, if you don't need to calculate the area of a trapezoid, if you don't need to conjugate verbs in a language you no longer speak, then those memories are allowed to fade, making space for information that is more immediately useful, more connected to your current goals and activities. And if you ever need that information again, you can look it up, relearn it, and your brain will encode it anew, perhaps more efficiently this time because the pathways, though weakened, might still carry some trace of the original learning. This process of forgetting through disuse is especially evident in procedural memories, the skills and habits you've learned but no longer practice. If you learned to play a musical instrument as a child but haven't touched it in decades, your ability to play will have diminished, possibly dramatically. But here's what's remarkable. The memory is not completely gone. If you were to pick up that instrument again, you would likely relearn faster than someone starting from scratch, a phenomenon known as savings. Your brain retains something, some residue of the original learning, even if you can't access it consciously, even if it feels like you've forgotten everything. This is evidence that forgetting is not always complete erasure. It's often more like fading, like a photograph left in the sun, where the image becomes lighter, less distinct, but still present, still recoverable under the right conditions. And there's a comfort in this, in knowing that what you've learned, what you've experienced, leaves a mark, however faint, and that even if you can't remember something now, the learning is not wasted. It's part of you, woven into the structure of your brain, and it can resurface when needed, sometimes more quickly than you expect. This is why relearning is often easier than learning for the first time. Your brain recognizes the material even if you don't consciously remember it, and the old pathways, though overgrown, can be cleared and strengthened again with surprising efficiency. There's also a phenomenon called context-dependent forgetting, which occurs when you can't remember something because you're in a different environment or state than you were when you learned it. This is the flip side of encoding specificity, which we touched on earlier. If you study for an exam in a quiet room and then take the exam in a noisy hall, you might find it harder to retrieve what you studied because the context has changed. The cues that were present during encoding, the silence, the particular lighting, the feel of your chair, are absent during retrieval, and without those cues, the memory is harder to access. But this doesn't mean the memory is gone. It means it's waiting for the right context, the right set of cues to be brought back into awareness. This is why returning to a place you haven't been in years can suddenly bring back a flood of memories. The physical environment acts as a powerful retrieval cue, activating neural networks that had been dormant, bringing to the surface experiences you thought you'd forgotten. The smell of a particular season, the sound of a specific song, the sight of an old photograph, all of these can serve as keys unlocking memories that were not lost, just temporarily inaccessible. And in this, there's a kind of magic, a recognition that your past is always with you, not as a burden, but as a resource, available when the conditions are right, when the cues align, when you find yourself in a moment that echoes something from before. Forgetting can also be strategic, deliberate, a tool you use to manage your mental and emotional life. When you choose not to dwell on something painful, when you redirect your thoughts away from a worry or a regret, you're engaging in a form of motivated forgetting, and over time, this can actually reduce the accessibility of those memories. This is not the same as repression, which is unconscious. This is more like intentional distraction, a decision to focus on other things, to build new memories, to orient yourself toward the future rather than the past. And while this won't erase difficult memories, it can make them less dominant, less intrusive, less likely to surface uninvited. You're essentially training your brain to prioritize certain pathways over others, to strengthen the connections that lead toward peace and weaken the ones that lead toward distress. There's a practice in some therapeutic traditions called memory reconsolidation, which involves deliberately recalling a difficult memory in a safe, supportive context, and then introducing new information or perspective that softens its impact. The idea is that when you retrieve a memory, it becomes temporarily malleable, open to being updated, and if you introduce a new element, a sense of safety, a realization of resilience, a moment of compassion, that element can be incorporated into the memory itself, changing how you experience it going forward. This is not about changing what happened, it's about changing your relationship to what happened, allowing the memory to exist without overwhelming you, without defining you, without holding you hostage to the past. And this brings us back to the central theme, the idea that forgetting is not the opposite of remembering, not the enemy of memory, but an essential partner in the process of being human. You need to forget in order to remember what matters. You need to let go in order to hold on. You need to allow the past to fade, at least in part, in order to be fully present, fully alive, fully open to what's happening now and what might happen next. And your brain, in its quiet wisdom, is managing this balance for you every moment of every day without you having to think about it, without you having to try. As we move into this quieter part of our journey together, let's consider the broader implications of forgetting, the ways it shapes not just individual memory, but culture, history, the collective understanding of who we are as communities and societies. Just as individuals forget, so do groups, and the processes are remarkably similar. Collective memory, the shared remembering of a community or nation, is selective, shaped by what gets recorded, what gets taught, what gets commemorated, and what gets left out, allowed to fade into obscurity. And just as individual forgetting can be adaptive, necessary, even kind, so too can collective forgetting serve a purpose, allowing societies to move past old conflicts, to forge new identities, to create space for reconciliation and growth. But collective forgetting can also be dangerous, a way of erasing inconvenient truths, of avoiding accountability, of allowing harmful patterns to repeat because the lessons of the past have been lost or deliberately obscured. The tension between remembering and forgetting, between honoring history and moving forward, is one of the fundamental challenges of human civilization, and there's no simple resolution, no clear rule about when it's right to remember and when it's right to let go. Each generation must navigate this tension anew, deciding what to preserve and what to release, what to teach and what to leave in the archive, what to commemorate and what to consign to the quiet shadows of the past. Monuments and memorials are physical embodiments of collective memory, attempts to make certain events and people unforgettable, to anchor them in stone and bronze so that they can't slip away with the passage of time. But even monuments are subject to forgetting. They can be ignored, bypassed, their meanings diluted or reinterpreted, their original context lost as the years accumulate, and the people who built them and the reasons they were built become more distant, more abstract. And sometimes monuments are removed, torn down, recontextualized, as societies grapple with changing values, and the recognition that what was once celebrated might now be seen as a symbol of oppression or harm. This is collective forgetting in action, a decision to withdraw attention, to stop reinforcing certain memories, to allow them to fade from prominence even if they remain in the historical record. And there's a parallel here with individual memory, with the way you might choose to stop rehearsing certain thoughts, to stop telling certain stories about yourself, to allow old narratives to lose their grip. Just as a society can decide that a particular monument no longer represents its values, you can decide that a particular memory, a particular way of seeing yourself, no longer serves you, and you can begin the process of letting it go, not by force, not by denial, but by gently withdrawing your attention, by choosing to focus on other things, other stories, other possibilities. And over time, with patience and consistency, the old narrative fades, becomes less vivid, less compelling, less central to who you are. Language itself is a repository of collective memory, carrying within it the accumulated knowledge, values, and experiences of the people who speak it. But language also forgets. Words fall out of use, meanings shift. Entire concepts can become obsolete as the world changes and the old ways of thinking no longer apply. This is linguistic forgetting, and it's a natural part of how languages evolve, adapting to new realities, absorbing new influences, shedding what's no longer needed. And in this process, there's both loss and renewal, a recognition that language, like memory, must be flexible, must be able to change, or it becomes a museum piece, preserved but no longer living, no longer capable of expressing the full range of human experience in the present moment. There are efforts, of course, to resist forgetting, both individual and collective. We write things down, create archives, build museums, record oral histories, all in an attempt to preserve what might otherwise be lost. And these efforts are valuable, essential even, because they allow future generations to learn from the past, to understand where they came from, to see patterns and connections that might otherwise be invisible. But preservation is not the same as remembering. You can have access to vast amounts of information without actually engaging with it, without integrating it into your understanding, without letting it shape your actions and your values. The information sits there, available but inert, like books on a shelf that are never read, and in a very real sense, it is forgotten, even though it hasn't been lost. True remembering requires active engagement, requires effort, requires making connections between the past and the present, between what was and what is and what might be. And this kind of remembering is difficult, demanding, sometimes painful, because it asks you to confront things you might prefer to avoid, to sit with discomfort, to question your assumptions. And so there's always a tension, a pull toward the ease of forgetting, the comfort of not having to deal with complexity, not having to carry the weight of history. And this is human, this is understandable. This is why forgetting is so prevalent, so persistent, so deeply woven into the fabric of how we function as individuals and as societies. But there's also a beauty in choosing to remember, in making the effort to engage with the past, to honor it, to learn from it, even when it's hard. And there's a parallel beauty in choosing to forget well, to let go of what no longer serves, to forgive, to release, to make space for something new. The key, perhaps, is discernment, the ability to recognize what's worth holding on to and what's worth releasing. This is not always clear, not always obvious, not always comfortable. But the process itself, the ongoing negotiation between remembering and forgetting, is part of what it means to be alive, to be conscious, to be engaged with the world in all its complexity and contradiction. There's a concept in philosophy called creative destruction, often applied to economics but relevant here as well, which suggests that in order for new growth to occur, old structures must be dismantled, must be allowed to fall away. And memory works in a similar way. In order to make space for new learning, new experiences, new ways of being, some of the old must be forgotten, must be released, must be allowed to fade into the background. This is not nihilism. This is not a rejection of the past. This is simply a recognition that life is a process of continual change, and that change requires letting go as much as it requires holding on. And as you rest here considering all of this, you might notice a certain lightness, a certain relief in knowing that you don't have to remember everything, that you're not failing when you forget, that your brain is designed to let go, to filter, to prioritize, to make room. You are not a repository of every moment you've ever lived. You are a living, changing being, shaped by memory but not defined by it, carrying your past with you but not imprisoned by it, free to remember and free to forget, to hold and to release, to honor what was and to be open to what might come next. In these final quiet moments together, let's rest in the simplest truths about memory and forgetting, the ones that don't require analysis or understanding, the ones that you can simply feel, simply know, simply allow to settle into your awareness like snow falling softly in the stillness of a winter night. You are not your memories. You are the awareness that holds them, the space in which they arise and fade, and that space is vast, unchanging, infinitely patient. Memories come and go, appearing like clouds in the sky of your consciousness, and just as clouds pass without changing the sky, memories pass without changing who you essentially are. There's a tradition in some contemplative practices of observing thoughts and memories without attachment, without judgment, simply watching them arise, linger, and dissolve, recognizing that they are transient, insubstantial, not the solid, permanent things they often seem to be. And in this observation, there's a kind of freedom, a recognition that you don't have to cling to every thought, every memory, every fragment of the past. You can let them come and let them go, trusting that what you need will remain, will return when it's needed, and what you don't need will fade away gently, naturally, without struggle or loss. Forgetting, from this perspective, is not something to fear or resist. It's simply part of the rhythm of consciousness, the ebb and flow of awareness, the natural breathing of the mind as it takes in new experiences and releases old ones. Just as you breathe in and breathe out without thinking about it, without worrying that the out-breath is a loss, you can remember and forget without anxiety, without the sense that something precious is slipping away irretrievably. What matters is here, now, available to you in this moment, and what has faded because it no longer serves, because its time has passed, because your mind, in its wisdom, has chosen to let it go. And there's a deep restfulness in this, in surrendering to the natural process, in trusting that your brain knows what it's doing, that it has been doing this for as long as humans have existed, long before you were born, long before anyone understood the mechanisms, the neurons, the synapses, the chemical signals. Your ancestors forgot, and they survived, they thrived, they passed on their genes and their stories and their wisdom, not by remembering everything, but by remembering what mattered and letting the rest dissolve back into the vast ocean of experience from which all memories emerge. You are part of that lineage, part of that long unbroken chain of forgetting and remembering, and you are doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, exactly what your brain is designed to do. You are filtering the world, making sense of it, holding on to what's meaningful and releasing what's not. And in this process, you are being shaped gently, continuously, into the person you are becoming. And who you are becoming is not determined by how much you remember. It's determined by how you engage with life, how you respond to what's in front of you, how you treat yourself and others, how you find meaning and connection and peace in the midst of a world that is constantly changing, constantly asking more of you than any single mind can hold. There's a kind of grace in forgetting, a lightness, an ease. It means you are not burdened by the totality of your past. You are not carrying every mistake, every regret, every moment of pain or embarrassment or fear. Those things may have happened, they may have shaped you, but they do not own you, they do not define you, and they do not have to be present in every moment of your life. Your brain, in its compassion, allows them to fade, allows the intensity to diminish, allows you to move forward without being weighed down by everything you've ever experienced. And this is a gift, a profound, ongoing gift that you receive every day, often without noticing, often without gratitude, but a gift nonetheless. And as you lie here, in this quiet space, you might simply rest in that gift, allowing yourself to feel the lightness of not having to remember, not having to hold on, not having to carry more than you can comfortably bear. You might imagine your memories as leaves on a stream, floating past, some catching your attention for a moment, some simply drifting by, and all of them moving downstream away from you, toward the sea where they will dissolve into something larger, something beyond individual recollection. And you are the bank of the stream, the stillness that watches, the presence that remains even as everything else flows past. You don't have to understand this, you don't have to remember it. You can simply be with it for this moment, for as long as feels right, and then you can let it go, let it join the countless other thoughts and ideas and experiences that have passed through your awareness and moved on. Because that's what everything does, eventually. It moves on, it fades, it becomes part of the background, part of the quiet hum of life that continues without needing your attention, without needing your effort, without needing anything from you at all. And in this letting go, in this gentle releasing, there's a kind of peace that doesn't depend on anything external, doesn't depend on remembering or forgetting, doesn't depend on success or failure or understanding. It's simply the peace of being, of existing, of allowing yourself to be held by the present moment, by the softness of the surface beneath you, by the rhythm of your breath, by the quiet knowledge that you are okay, that you have always been okay, that even in forgetting, even in not knowing, even in letting go, you are whole. You are complete. You are exactly where you need to be. And so we arrive here, in this final stretch of quiet, where words begin to thin out, where thoughts become softer, where even the ideas we've been exploring start to dissolve into something less defined, less structured, less demanding of your attention. There's nothing more you need to learn, nothing more you need to understand, nothing more you need to remember from this time we've spent together. If something has stayed with you, it will stay. If something has already faded, that's exactly as it should be. Your mind has been listening in its own way, taking what it needs and letting the rest drift away, and that process is perfect, complete, requiring nothing more from you than the simple willingness to be here, to rest, to let yourself be carried by the gentle current of these words and the silence that surrounds them. Memory and forgetting are not opposing forces locked in eternal struggle. They are partners, collaborators, two aspects of the same process, working together to help you navigate the world, to learn and grow and change without being overwhelmed, without losing yourself in the infinite detail of existence. And as you rest here now, you might simply appreciate that partnership, the way your brain takes care of you, the way it filters and sorts and releases and holds, all without you having to direct it, without you having to understand it, without you having to do anything at all, except allow it to happen, which it does constantly, effortlessly, like your heart beating, like your lungs breathing, like the earth turning beneath you as you sleep. There are people who have lost their ability to forget, rare individuals with a condition called hypothymesia, who remember almost everything that has ever happened to them in vivid, exhaustive detail. And while this might sound like a gift, many of them describe it as a burden, an overwhelming flood of memories that never stops, never fades, never allows them the relief of letting go. They are trapped in an endless present that contains every moment of their past, and they cannot filter, cannot prioritize, cannot find the peace that comes from forgetting what doesn't need to be remembered. And this tells us something important, something we've been circling around throughout this entire journey. Forgetting is not a failure of memory. It is memory working exactly as it should, protecting you, caring for you, making space for you to live your life without being crushed under the weight of everything that has ever happened. You are designed to forget. You are meant to forget. And in that design, in that intention, there is a deep, abiding kindness, a recognition that life is not about holding on to everything, but about moving through, flowing with, allowing things to come and go in their own time, in their own way. And as you move closer to sleep now, as your thoughts become slower, softer, less connected, you might simply let that kindness wash over you. Let it seep into your awareness. Let it reassure you that whatever you're carrying, whatever you're trying to remember, whatever you're afraid of forgetting, it's all being handled, it's all being taken care of, it's all unfolding exactly as it needs to unfold. The past is behind you, not as a burden, but as a foundation, something that has shaped you but does not imprison you, something you can draw on when needed, but do not have to carry consciously every moment. The future is ahead of you, unknown, open, full of possibility, and you don't need to remember every detail of how you got here in order to move forward into what comes next. Simply need to be present, to be aware, to be willing to meet each moment as it arrives, with as much clarity and compassion as you can muster, and to trust that your mind, your brain, your entire being is equipped to handle the rest, to sort through the information, to decide what matters, to let go of what doesn't, to take care of you in ways you might never fully understand or appreciate, but that are happening nonetheless, constantly, faithfully, quietly. And as the silence begins to take over, as the words become fewer, as the space between thoughts grows wider and more inviting, you might simply rest in that silence, in that space, in the quiet knowledge that there's nothing left to do, nowhere left to go, nothing left to prove or achieve or remember. You can simply be here, in this moment, in this breath, in this gentle fading of awareness as sleep begins to pull you under, soft and warm and welcoming. The world will still be here when you wake. Your memories will still be here, or some of them will, and the ones that have faded will have made space for something new, something fresh, something that serves the person you are becoming. Let yourself drift now, let yourself soften, let your body sink deeper into rest. Let your mind release its grip on waking consciousness and slip into the quiet, restorative darkness of sleep. There's nothing to hold on to, nothing to fear, nothing to resist. Forgetting is not loss, it's release, it's relief. It's the gentle hand of your own mind, guiding you toward peace, toward rest, toward the quiet renewal that happens when you stop trying, stop thinking, stop remembering, and simply allow yourself to dissolve into sleep, into dreams, into the vast forgiving ocean of unconsciousness, where nothing is required of you, where you are held without effort, where you are safe, where you are free. In that freedom, in that safety, in that perfect, gentle letting go, you might find the deepest rest of all, the kind that comes not from remembering or forgetting, but from simply being, simply existing, simply allowing yourself to be exactly as you are in this moment, in this breath, in this quiet, endless now that asks nothing of you except that you surrender to it, that you trust it, that you let it carry you wherever you need to go, into sleep, into dreams, into the soft, forgiving embrace of the night, where memory and forgetting dissolve into something larger, something beyond words, something that has no name but feels like peace, like home, like the quiet certainty that everything is exactly as it should be and you are exactly where you need to be. And there is nothing more to do, nothing more to think, nothing more to remember, nothing at all except this gentle, infinite, dissolving quiet.